Shabbat Shalom. The worst part of holding the memories is not the pain. It's the loneliness of it. Memories need to be shared. This is a quote from the book, The Giver. It was one of my favorites as a child, although I'm not quite sure I really knew what it was about, but I knew I loved it. The book is about a dystopian society where one person is the holder of all memories, and this person is the bridge between a past life, the outside world, and the society that knows none of these things. They have the burden of bearing the weight of history, of imagination, and sadness. The architects of this world had no faith in the greater community in meaning-making and charged one individual, the giver, with knowing the past, thus relegating him or herself to a life of isolation. He or she alone transmits memory to the next giver. The book is obviously a meditation on the importance of history and shared memory, a reflection on the role memory has in shaping us as individuals in the service of creating a healthy community. It's about inheritance and what we choose to inherit. This book is a warning against being shielded from memory, even when that memory or those memories cause us pain. This is the opposite of our own community's blueprint. As Jews and as a Jewish community, we do not shield ourselves from the pain of memory. What is the service or the time of year that we can count on a full sanctuary? It's Yizkor. And why do we love matzo balls? Because we ate them at our bubby's house. And if you do not have a bubby, it was the food we ate wishing we had one. And our essential dictum of Jewish law is to remember that we were once slaves. Our memory is always in the service of something greater. In his essay, The Builders, Franz Rosenzweig wrote, "In the history of other peoples, to reach back for what has been left behind is only necessary from time to time. For us, Jews, it is a constant, vital necessity. And we must not forget that it is a vital necessity, for we must be able to live within our everlastingness." Memory is a point of connection and continuity, and being a part of that chain tethers us to where we came from, but also binds us to our uncertain and unknown future. And memory, in the role of history, figures more prominently right now than any other time of the year. Wednesday night will begin Tisha B'Av. It's our only other 25-hour fast. It simply means the 9th of the month of Av, which we are in right now. And it commemorates the destruction of the first and second temple, but has come to stand in for many different calamities that have befallen our people. It is a day of words and memory that concludes a period of mourning, both communal and historical. And this solemn day works because as Jews, we are good with words and we are comfortable with memory. Yet at some earlier point, memory was held only by the prophet, transmitted to him by God. The quote I read from The Giver could have been said by Moses or any other prophet. While memory had always been open to all, the ordinary Israelite seemed absent from its relevance, outside of the exchange of time, memory, and its subsequent transmission. And this brings us to this Shabbat, where we begin reading the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. And unlike the other four books, this is not about events as they unfold, but about the transmission of history from Moses to the Israelites. Moses' audience are those who will usher in a new life, a new land, without their maestro of memory. The crucial line of this week's Torah portion arrives at the very beginning, in verse 5. On the other side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses began expounding this Torah, Be'er et ha-Torah hazot, to make clear, or to expound, this Torah. That last phrase can also be translated this teaching or this law. So what does this mean, ha-Torah hazot, this Torah? And how far can we extend the reach of this phrase? How would the Torah, or for that matter, how would Judaism be different if it said Moses began expounding the Torah? Moses describing this Torah, the Torah he knew in the history of the Israelites as he experienced it, including the experiences in the history he did not live, is an egalitarian move. It is the opening and the flattening of a previously held privilege. This passage illustrates the first time in the Torah that someone other than God is interpreting history. It is the first time we see an inherited memory, and it is the first transmission of cultural identity from person to person. It is here that we get a better understanding of the word Deuteronomy, a better understanding of it as the second Torah, because it is here that we begin the oral Torah, the sacred enterprise that is unfolding in front of all of us. In Devarim, our tradition is no longer moved forward by actions, wars, and transcendent moments, but by words and interpretations. They are carried on the tips of our tongues and the backs of our collected memory. Michael Walzer, in his book Exodus and Revelation, wrote that perhaps we should simply say that the covenant is carried forward on a flood of talk, argument and analysis, folklore and expansion, interpretation and reinterpretation. Our rituals are enacted through language, and we interact with our tradition, with our history and our memory through words. We must always guard against these words and these memories being owned by the few. Jonas, who is the giver, understood how lonely and destructive it is to be the only one who owns or understands memory, the one who is the sole recipient of history. And Moses understood how dangerous it is without communal participation. Thursday, we will mourn the loss of the temple. Yet that was a religious system that maintained only a slightly larger group of elites holding memory. We mourn it, but we do not want to return to it. After the destruction, our rabbis, the first rabbis, initiated a shift from the priestly sacrifice within the temple to a community of equal participants where everyone, everywhere, theoretically, had a say in shaping the future and remembering the past. The task of interacting with our past, both good and bad, the task of relating to and studying our tradition, is a responsibility of all of ours. As we begin the book of Devarim and we reread about our trials and travails, I hope we all look to expound upon this tradition in our own meaningful way. It is only when we challenge the Torah and our tradition that we are able to form our own memories and our own words with our own meaning. And then it'll be up to us to transmit it to the next generation. Shabbat Shalom.